All right, Mets fans, welcome back to the platform for our latest trade deadline relay segment to get into. You should not be surprised by this if you've been following the content, as we've been pumping out everything regarding this New York Metropolitan team from now up until this year's deadline. What are they going to do? What are the latest rumors regarding this club? Well, when it has to do with what David Stearns plans to do and what we could see happen leading up to the deadline, there's no better man than to have a deep discussion with than USA Today's very own Bob Nightengale. Bob, first and foremost, thank you so much for coming on today.
Sure, my pleasure, Wardy.
All right, guys, what we're going to get into with Bob today is not only going to be his thoughts about Major League Baseball as a whole with what he's been hearing, what he's been covering, but also the Mets specifically, obviously, and that's why you clicked on this video. So expect us to talk about a lot of players in this one, various ones, maybe guys you're for or against. So whatever your thoughts are from the following topics that we're about to break down, please make sure to relay them in the comments down below. But thank you kindly for hitting that like and subscribe button on your way in for this big Mets discussion that we're about to have leading up to the deadline. And also, thank you guys for hearing from our amazing sponsor at SeatGeek. All you guys got to do is utilize our promo code WardyNYM because you're going to get 10% off your next ticket purchase, whether it's for Mets tickets, the way that they've been selling out 41,000 plus strong for a week series against the Angels. You know that a lot of Mets fans are locked in at Citi Field right now. So if you want to head over there, concert show tickets, comedy show tickets, NFL season right around the corner, you name it, head over there and utilize our promo code WardyNYM for your next ticket purchase there at SeatGeek. But Bob, let's waste no time and let's get right into this. My first question for you is as follows. As someone who has been covering and doing a fantastic job for a number of years on the beat, not just for one specific team, but all Major League Baseball for USA Today, I would love to hear your process about how you go about your day, especially when you have a lot of things, rumblings going on leading up to the deadline or the peak of the offseason around the winter meetings, as well as have you heard anything different or maybe the approach with the Mets since covering them going back to when Steve Cohen first became owner? Because there's been multiple front office changes over that time, but I'm just curious if someone like yourself gets relayed information maybe more in some areas versus less in others, given the fact that they haven't had that stability there in their front office. I'm really curious.
Yeah, usually the day starts off by you checking your phone, you go on your computer, check online, read some stories, make calls, a lot more text messages. If there's a game in town, I'll go to that, and then talk to, have dinner with scouts, see players, see coaches, that sort of thing. Because usually this time of year, everybody's in the loop. You'll see a lot more scouts out at ballparks. Go from there. The Mets are probably a little bit more closed-lipped than used to be. It used to be kind of a wide-open door where everything and every got leaked out. Everybody knew what was going on there. So now it's run a lot more like other ball clubs where barely anything leaks out. And this time of year you got to keep things secretive. Even the Boston Red Sox traded Rafael Devers. That was so secretive because they knew if the word got out, it could have been torpedoed by fan reaction or something like that. So the best to operate is just in secrecy until you're about to pull the deal.
So when you say that the Mets are operating more like most Major League Baseball clubs with being as tight-lipped as they can, would you say that beforehand they were like drastically kind of more in a class of their own, or like the floodgates were constantly open kind of thing where you could find that information fairly easier versus now?
Yeah, way too easily, but where it became kind of a running joke when the GMs were there. They said this stuff, we might as well just announce what we're doing on the conference call, show everybody our cell phone. Everything leaked out immediately. Now they kind of closed those leaks and they're operating like normal.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm very interested to hear that because we've speculated as fans over the years and we've heard things through the grapevine, but to hear that reaffirmed by you, I think is pretty telling. That I'm happy as a fan that things are more tight-lipped, but at the same time, I know that for someone like yourself, it isn't necessarily the most appealing thing because you're trying to find out as much information as possible about all these teams and what they're going to be doing, especially leading up to the deadline. So I think as we get into our next question now, Bob, I'm not going to ask you about the Mets just yet, but outside the Mets, what have you been hearing across Major League Baseball right now? Some of the key topics going on from teams trying to buy big time or even some key sellers as well leading up to the deadline?
Well, it's starting to all shape in a form. I mean, at the All-Star break, there were about 25 teams that still thought they had a chance. Now we're seeing teams dropping out. St. Louis just got beat, 2 or 3 games in Colorado, got swept by the Diamondbacks. Definitely seller. So Ryan Helsley will be traded. Arizona Diamondbacks, I think they had their mind made up, but then when they swept the Cardinals, they were saying, well, I wonder if we're really into it. They're not in it. So they're going to be selling 4 or 5 pieces. So we're starting to see more of that, like reality setting in for the teams that thought they had a chance. So, usually these trade deadlines, how they work is everything happens at the end. We'll see a couple trades in the couple days before, July 31st, but typically it all happens the last 3 hours.
Yeah, the last 3 hours are usually hectic. I myself will be covering not only full time here on YouTube, but as well as the Bleacher Report app throughout that day. So, like you, like me, it's going to be a very busy day of all day coverage for Major League Baseball. And not just Major League Baseball and what you said in regards to Helsley. I know he's easily one of the hottest commodities of relievers. He's just one of an abundance right now of teams, I think, trying to figure out between themselves, as well as we've been hearing a lot of rumblings with teams like the Guardians, the Orioles, what have you, are those clubs that have a lot of relievers to choose from, somewhat club control. Would you say that in particular with teams like, say, the Guardians, will they find themselves more in that category of actually selling like a Clase, a Cade Smith, or do you think they really need to be blown away to even consider such a thing?
I think you're really blown away. I can't see him moving them. I really can't. I mean, you're in the AL Central. You got a chance to compete in that thing every year. When you have a guy like Clase and such a cheap contract, why move him unless someone just overwhelms you and panics? So you might as well listen. I mean, everybody's going to listen. I remember San Diego, Kevin Towers, their general manager, he would listen on Tony Gwynn and Trevor Hoffman. It didn't matter it's not going to hurt. The Dodgers, I mean, they're not going to trade Shohei Ohtani, but someone, wants to make an offer, and they'll listen for the heck of it, just out of kicks and nothing else. So yeah, you'll see a lot of that. But I think the biggest trade has already been made. I think with the Rafael Devers trade, I don't think we'll see any trade come close to that in these this next week.
So having said that, then, when you look at a team like the Minnesota Twins in particular, because they have a very similar situation from Clase this time to young Duran, as well as a guy like Griffin Jax, there's been rumblings of Joe Ryan, but I think we can all agree there's no chance that happens unless he really get blown away. When it comes to the relievers, however, because the Twins have been in this fickle spot of, they've had success, but they've really struggled with the health a lot of the times with the Buxtons, the Correas, and obviously the Royce Lewises of the world. So knowing that there's been that constant influx, would you say that they're in the same situation as the Guardians when it comes to selling any of those relievers, or do you think that there's a little bit of a greater likelihood there?
I think more of a likelihood. I think they're further away than the Guardians. Things haven't gone right. Teams up for sale. I can't see him trading both Jax and Duran. I think they traded one of them. I don't think there's any way in the world they're trading Joe Ryan. Makes no sense. And those are the kind of guys you build around. So, but I think a Duran or Jax get moved just because everybody's panicking. Everybody needs relievers and closers. So why not chop them?
Especially when you know that it could be coming out of bidding war, especially because everyone needs relievers, as you just said. If a guy like Duran becomes the hottest commodity of a reliever at the deadline, there's going to be teams potentially willing to pay a premium, knowing that he's still under a couple years left of control, versus, say, like a Danny Coulomb, who I know is available as well. Very good southpaw option for them out of their bullpen, but he will not be nearly as costly, at least on the forefront, than someone like Duran. Very, very different profiles, even though that they both had plenty of success this season. So now getting into the Mets, this is what I want to set you up for, because we know the Mets are going to be plenty involved in the reliever market especially. What to this point have you heard in regards to the Mets' interest in certain areas? And are there any players specifically that come to mind that you have heard either through the grapevine as of late, maybe guys that you previously have reported on? I know that you talked about Luis Robert going back to a couple months ago with his initial connection with the Mets. So that is far from surprising there. But I'm curious if anything has really changed since then.
No, Luis Robert's playing a lot better now, and he's going to have a little bit more, a little more trade value. They should trade him during the winter. They didn't. I know the White Sox would love to get Mark Vientos. I thought, there's no chance they can trade him. Well, they could. They got Beatty now. It is possible. So could be some sort of deal there. Obviously, everybody needs relievers. They do too. They like to get one of those strong back end guys. I think they need to, if they're really serious about going all the way, another starter. Just that rotation is not scary in the playoffs whatsoever. I mean, you compare the Mets rotation to the Phillies rotation, is night and day.
It is night and day. And that was the biggest concern for some Mets fans, including myself, heading into the season, is because you knew lineup-wise they could go toe-to-toe with anybody when they're right. But pitching-wise, depth, quality-wise, the Phillies are kind of in a class of their own right now in the National League East. And in order for the Mets to kind of get over that hump, while I'm not overly concerned about the Phillies personally from a Mets fan point of view, I know that they are very deep when it comes to rotation configuration. And the Mets right now have question marks. Even with Kodai Senga coming back from injury, Sean Manaea has looked good in his first couple starts back. There's that question mark as to what they should do there. And while speaking actually to Wolf Salmon of The Athletic, who's been doing a very good job covering the Mets specifically the past couple of years, we had a conversation yesterday. He had relayed that from what he has currently heard, that if the Mets are going to be landing a starter, it isn't likely to be as much of, say, a mid to back end guy the way that they had been previously connected to, say, a Mitch Keller or an Edward Cabrera, who I personally like a lot when I look at his upside, but rather more of an ace caliber starter. And when I had that conversation with him then, he said how Joe Ryan is really the only guy that sticks out like a sore thumb as an ace caliber that's available right now. It appears that may have changed since then. What is your current thoughts about what the Padres are doing with their rotation, and could someone like Dylan Cease be had for this Mets team?
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Cease has definitely been available. Has been available for actually about a month, and they're letting teams know that, hey, we need some help, and he's a free agent. So if you give us a controllable pitcher, another piece, we'll deal him. Now, if you're a team that interested in Cease, you got to think, why are the Padres moving him? The Padres need to make the playoffs. Is he this mediocre? He's had a very mediocre season. So I'm kind of intrigued by Sandy Alcantara. I think that would fit the Mets more in the sense that you got 2 more years of control. He just pitched lights out today. So, we'll see what happens. But that sort of thing where you're kind of, gambling how he's going to do the rest of the season, but to get him 2 more years after this, is pretty cool. I think that guy would stand out. And of course, Keller, I think from Pittsburgh, he's better than what is shown. So I think those guys are probably the best. And you look at the Diamondback guys. I'll take both those guys over Dylan Cease, particularly Merrill Kelly. He's been pitching lights out, veteran, knows how to pitch. Gallen has really struggled, but yet he's a Philly kid. He's 3-0 against the Yankees and Mets this year, 0.92 ERA. He loves the big cities.
He does love the big cities. I'm glad that you brought up Gallen because he's someone I've talked about in the past, knowing that he's, again, New Jersey native, probably grew up a Phillies fan because I know he wasn't far from there, East Coast guy, and I think that change of scenery would bode him well, going from a fringe playoff team in the Diamondbacks to a clear contender right now in the Mets in a deep run that they're hopefully going to have here as we get on throughout the remainder of summer. But to go back from talking about Sandy and Dylan Cease there, I agree in the sense that I think Sandy may be more likely in the sense of even what you have to give up to get him, because while Cease has had an underwhelming season when you look at his baseline ERA, he's a rental, and even in a rental, bidding wars can naturally happen. Sandy still, at least with another year plus of control, can be appealing for someone like David Stearns, who, if you are going to give up any assets, decent assets for a guy who is still sitting, I think, north of a 70 ERA, so Sandy still needs clearly a change of scenery and to adjust there, that could bode well for this team. And if the Mets were to make a trade for Sandy in particular, are there any players that immediately pop in your head as to what you could see being the corresponding move? Or do you think it would be more so on solely the prospect end?
I think it'd just be the prospects. I'm not ruling out a guy like Vientos who doesn't have a salary arbitration, but they're looking for young people. They're always looking for pitching. So I just think it would take probably 2 of a team's top 10 prospects because they don't have to move them. They can move them this winter. They can move them next trade deadline, the winter after that. So whoever gets them for 3 trade deadlines. So they got a valuable piece. It really worked out well. They pitched so well his last start. We'll see if he does it again. But the fact you have him, it's going to be a steep price. It may be worth it.
Would you say that Dylan Cease's price is currently similar to Sandy's or different, and why?
Way lower. He's a rental. And like we talked about, he's had a very mediocre season. And you got to ask yourself, nobody knows this guy better than San Diego Padres. The Padres are trying to win the World Series like everybody else. So why are the Padres so eager to dump him? So you got to ask yourself that, like, why are we taking someone else's goods that they don't think, if the Padres don't think he can help them to the playoffs, why should everybody else think that, hey, he's a magical guy? I'm not sure he'd be more than a number 3 or 4 starter on the Mets right now.
Hey Mets fans, if you love diving deep into the numbers like WAR or ERA, then you absolutely are going to love what today's video sponsor Moo brings to your investing game. Think Moneyball, but this time for your portfolio. I'm beyond excited to share that Moo, the proud trading platform of the New York Mets, is here to level up your investing. Moo is a global trading platform currently serving over 25 million users in markets like the United States, Canada, Singapore, and Japan. Whether you're just starting out or if you're a more seasoned trader, Moo's app and desktop platform offers commission-free trading on stocks, ETFs, and options, no contract fees either. So plus, you get premium tools, guys, whether it's going to be the institutional grade analytics, Morningstar research, and analyst ratings, all free for funded users. And right now, Moo is doubling down for Mets fans. Sign up through my exclusive link down below, make a qualifying deposit, and get up to, yes, 60 free stocks, plus not 1 but 2 Mets Suite tickets. Not to mention, Moo customers can get free tickets to all Monday home games at Citi Field, and who knows, you may even see me at a game. And with 0 commissions and 0 contract fees on stock and ETF options, you keep more of your wins. Are you guys ready to trade smarter? Download Moo now and swing for the financial fences. And shout out once more to Moo for being an amazing sponsor here on the platform. That's interesting. I would say right now that when you look at the Mets rotation, if Cease would be able to make proper adjustments, he could be as good as, I won't say necessarily Kodai Senga, but I think he could be as good as your 2 in your rotation. But to your point, because he has been underwhelming throughout the course of the season, his floor could find himself not really being anything greater than even what the Mets are getting in, say, like a Clay Holmes, for example, who's been more middle back-end rotation option for them, Frankie Montas, etc. So, like, you clearly need a needle mover there, and it's fascinating because if the Mets are really stubborn on this notion that if we're going to land a starter, it's only a guy with ace caliber upside, I think we've already said all the guys available out there. Is there anyone else that you could think of that you think would maybe check off some of those boxes?
No, I mean, they could bring back a Steven Matz, that sort of thing. Sonny Gray's not waiving no trade. Neither is Miles Mikolas. I'm trying to think up and down. And if they want to bring back Luis Severino, he's certainly available. He's had good numbers on the road, just struggles at home. So we look, Severino you get for 2 more years after this. So he might, have some upside and, knows the New York market, obviously. So he could be a decent little fit.
Yeah, Sevy's definitely a change of scenery candidate. I think he's made it abundantly clear how much he doesn't like playing in Sacramento and how much he likes playing everywhere else that we've seen throughout the course of the season. So that wouldn't overly shock me either. I think the A's would just have to do something that they're usually not inclined to do, and that's maybe eat salary, right? Because he's on the largest contract in A's history, and he's pushing, at least a 5+ ERA right now. You have to wonder exactly how much would you have to give up to get him, which would obviously not be much. And secondly, would the A's be eating any of that deal? That's certainly a fascinating thought for sure. We talked about that in the past as well, because I think Severino would probably be the first to tell you, I would like to come back to the Mets. He tried last year. It wasn't for a lack of effort, but the Mets settled for $6 million less to sign Frankie Montas at $34 million. So it's interesting. I'm really, really intrigued to see what the Mets are going to do on the rotation front, should they go there. Personally, in my opinion, I would love a Dylan Cease. I'm actually a lot more bullish on him than others, mainly because I just have confidence that I think it's change of scenery and working with the Mets pitching lab would bode him well. But to your point, it's a great counter. If the Padres are in a win now stage and still plan to buy to a degree at this year's deadline, why would they feel so inclined to want to trade Cease? And I think the answer to that in semi-part is because of their influx with their offense, right? I feel like the Padres, if they're going to be trading away someone like Dylan, you want to reinforce that somewhere else. I'm not exactly sure what they would do that rotation-wise externally, but offensively, they feel like they're probably in position to land another bat. Would you agree with that assessment that the Padres would probably want to add more offense there in return, or just kind of get rid of Cease for the sake of not wanting to deal with the salary anymore?
No, nothing to do with the salary. They need a bat. They need an outfielder. They also need a catcher, and they could use a controllable type pitcher. But yeah, my point with Cease is just, if he was all that, the Padres wouldn't even think about it, trading him. Remember now, they had a chance to beat the Dodgers last year in the first round of the playoffs. He lost both their playoff games, got killed the second time. So if I'm a Mets fan, if I'm a Mets executive, the guy I want is Merrill Kelly. I'd take Kelly in a heartbeat over Cease. Same thing. Free agent at the end of the year. Cease has pitched lights out. I mean, Kelly's pitched lights out, like 2.6, 2.70 RA. He's done well in the big moments, pitching WBC, lights out. He would not be scared in New York. I'm not saying Cease would either, but Cease pitches in the, both of them pitch in National League West. But if you go from National League West to National League East, you're going to give up a whole lot more runs. So the numbers that guys accumulate in the NL West, you better put a little asterisk on it because it's not the same as pitching other divisions. Because there's a outside Coors Field, National League West has got 4 pitchers ballparks.
They do have 4 pitcher ballparks. That's true. And you also have to bear in mind the competition, right? I mean, when you get teams like the Diamondbacks, the Giants constantly facing teams like the Dodgers, the Padres are always a pest, especially depending on what rivals are facing the NL West. There can be a lot of battles, and that will naturally inflate things a bit. And I'm glad that you highlighted Kelly more because I like Zach Gallen a lot. I like that Gallen's a rental. I like that currently, based on his lack of production this season, that you should be able to land Gallen in a similar category to Cease, if not even cheaper potentially, knowing that they're both rentals having off seasons. But Kelly brings that stability, right? He's not going to overwhelm you in any way, shape, or form of his arsenal, but he's just a rock solid guy that can go out there and make sure that he can give you anywhere from 5 to 7 strong innings every turn of the order. So I agree with the assessment that Merrill Kelly's probably the best, sure guarantee thing that the Mets could get while not having to give up their entire farm in the process either. So yeah, Merrill Kelly's going to be a fun one to see if the Mets find themselves linked to him more from now up until the deadline. But a couple players that we know the Mets have been linked to have not only been Luis Robert, but we have heard the rumblings of the Jaron Durans of the world, the Cedric Mullins, and even, we have heard sprinklings to a degree, depending on who you talk to, a Harrison Bader reunion. The Mets are pretty adamant on replacing Tyrone Taylor's consistent play in center field with something of more certainty there, as his bat has completely fallen off over the past month and a half, filling in that role more for Jose Siri, who's been out with injury. So out of the outfielders that I just listed, and if there are any more that you could relay, please do. Which one would you say is most likely to land with the Mets, and why?
I'll still go Robert just because they've talked about him for so long now. They've had a lot of dialogue. They've scouted each other's farm systems. And he can still play terrific defense. The offense has been the problem. Cedric Mullins is a steady guy. If you want to go more of a sure thing of all the guys, it's definitely Cedric Mullins. If you want to take a chance and upside and someone doing something special, then I'll go Luis Robert. Particularly what he's done the last 12 days. He's had about 360 or so. Finally looks good. Obviously healthy. But he can be an electric player. I think a guy like that going from White Sox, a losing team with no fans to go to the Mets, I think just the whole atmosphere would lift his game to another level.
I 100% agree with you, and this has been a constant debate I've had with fans. I guarantee, Bob, as soon as I post this, we're going to have a lot of discourse in the comments saying no to Robert, yes to Robert, because a lot of people are like, his 2023 season was an anomaly. He's never going to be that again. Then you have other fans that say, even if he doesn't get to being roughly a 40 home run hitter again, it doesn't mean that he can't be a very productive team and a clear change of scenery aspect. And I think when you look at Robert, outside of the millions that he's making each year, there probably is a lack of motivation on the daily to get up and play for a White Sox team versus if he's in a deep lineup with Juan Soto to his left side, Francisco Lindor to his right, and Pete Alonso leading the ship there on the power front. I think it would really be a night and day aspect for him for the better. And the reason why I really do hope the Mets land Luis Robert is in part because I feel like if the Mets do not land him, it's going to be the Philadelphia Phillies. What's your thoughts about that?
The Phillies aren't sold on him. They think he's okay. I can see Mullen more with the Phillies. They're not crazy. They made some bad moves. I mean, when they signed Max Kepler, everybody in Minnesota laughed like, you're kidding me. He's going to have a terrible season. It's not going to work. It hasn't worked. So they're lukewarm on Luis Robert. And they're right up against the luxury tax, too, where, they already did it with Dave Robertson. They still want another reliever. So I don't think they want to give up, much at all for any center fielder, let alone Robert. I think they'd rather plug that hole in and get one more bullpen arm. So they like Robert okay, but not as much as the Mets do.
Happy to hear that as someone who wants Robert. So to expand on the Phillies, outside of them, the Dodgers, and the Padres, when we look at the true top contending teams, and of course the Brewers and the Cubs from the NL Central, which team out of that group would you say is likeliest to have the biggest splash out of everybody else?
Yeah, I would think the Phillies. I mean, they got David Robertson. gamble. We'll see. I would think they want one more arm in there because the time's starting to run out on these guys. They're starting to get older. Schwarber's a free agent. JT Realmuto's a free agent, and I think anything less than a World Series appearance would be considered a disaster for the Phillies. It's not going to be a disaster for the Mets, but for the Phillies, it would be. Plus that rotation, you hate to waste. And they got the best rotation in baseball. You hate to waste that and not take advantage of it. So I think they'll be very aggressive. I think the Cubs will too. He's on last year's contract. The GM, Jed Hoyer, they'll love to get their frontline starter and another bullpen arm. I don't think they'll go after Suarez like a lot of teams will. Even the Mets will probably snap on him, but I think will make a couple moves there just to say, we got to do something to keep ahead of the Brewers. The Brewers aren't going away.
The Brewers aren't going away, and that isn't overly shocking. This is their MO every single season. Even if they start slow, they usually pick things up to be one of the better contending teams at the NL Central. And while the Cubs have had a fantastic season in large part to this point, they are still a couple pieces away. And the Cubs fans will be the first to tell you that, especially in the bullpen. I've interacted with some throughout the season, and they've said exactly that. They need to shore up the bullpen. They need to add more quality in that rotation. So if the Mets don't land someone like Sandy, I could definitely see Sandy going to a team like the Cubs, or Dylan Cease. If he does get dealt, are the Cubs going to be the biggest biter there? There's certainly a couple areas to go into when we evaluate a team like Chicago and the other contending teams out of the National League. But to reel back in, to bring you back to the Mets for a second, outside of their, well, not outside, but when looking at their infielders, specifically Mark Vientos, who we know has been in plenty of trade talks throughout the season, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, and Luis Angel Acuna, if you had to guess at this point in time which one would be most likely to be dealt by the deadline, who do you think that would be?
I would probably go anything but Beatty. I think Acuna could definitely be dealt. It's not like that strong prospect, a nice prospect, but it's not going to come back and haunt you. I think Vientos, I think the patience is running out a little bit. So I'll probably go, either Vientos or Acuna to be dealt first.
I agree. I think Beatty's here to stay. He's been very versatile for the Mets this year, and his bat over the past couple months, too, has been more than fine for what they've been pretty much looking for there at the hot corner or at the times that he's gotten second base reps. So full agreement there. And then next question that I have for you, not too many more here, is the following. Not only do the Mets have an abundance of infield options to choose from, but they may very well utilize that to a degree to help out with the pitching. And when evaluating pitching, when evaluating the outfield or any other area, are there any players that come to mind for you that you haven't currently reportedly connected to the Mets over the past couple months that you wouldn't be surprised if you found out, oh yeah, this is what I'm hearing now in the next couple of days, the Mets are linked to so-and-so, and here's why?
Yeah, they like to go under the radar. I mean, that's, what the Brewers are doing now, getting these under the radar guys. That's what David Stearns did in Milwaukee. That's what he's doing now with the Mets. So it's going to be a guy, probably not a household name, but a guy he identifies that could become a star. That's the way he works. I don't see David Stearns overpaying for anybody as far as on the trade market. That's just not his MO. He gets these guys on the radar. The Soto contract, that was from the owner, Steve Cohen. I think he was playing hardball with Pete Alonso. That's the way he works. So I think the same thing here is that they'll get some help, but I don't see a big splash like, oh my God, I can't believe the Mets gave away this prospect.
Right. I think it'll be very strategic with what David has done and hopefully an upgrade over last year's deadline, right? Because even though the Mets exceeded everyone's expectations after initially falling 11 games below 500 back in last May, they were still underwhelming, to say the least, at the deadline between Paul Blackburn being their starter pickup, Jesse Winker, who was productive for them, but in limited DH role / corner outfield. And then reliever-wise, they really didn't do anything because they brought in Huascar Brosman, who has been far more productive this year than he was last year, but previously they brought in Ryan Stanek and Phil Maton, guys that weren't really performing well with their current clubs, but the Mets were able to maximize and get the best out of. So I anticipate that there will be a mix of them kind of doing exactly that, from having a contingent of players that are in the group of, solid, but have upside to even be better than what they've been, with more established guys, as we've already relayed and alluded to in this conversation. So one of the final questions I have for you is as follows. If you had to pick a sleeper team right now from the American League or the National League that could really surprise some people with maybe the things they do or don't do at this year's deadline, what team comes to mind?
I can go with the Texas Rangers. That pitching staff's unbelievable. I mean, Jacob Duran is pitching like he did with the Mets. They got some studs there in the rotation with the Evaldi. They don't have that bullpen. And they got guys that underperformed offensively. I think that's a team to watch. I also think Seattle's going to be aggressive. They're all over Eugenio Suarez. I used to think he was going to be a Yankee, maybe maybe a Met somewhere, but now, or even a Tiger. I think the Mariners are all in and get this guy back. They made a huge mistake dumping him in the first place. That they're going to be aggressive. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Texas get back in the hunt here and get back in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Rangers, if they go on a big run here at this year's deadline, it really comes down to that offense, right? Because their rotation has been their stronghold. It's carried them. But they've had pretty much everything imaginable go wrong offensively this year, which is what's led them to making their drastic hitting coach changes throughout the year, stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to see if they're going to try to build around Jacob deGrom the way that the Mets, unfortunately, were not able to do enough, at least, while they had him in his prime days and staying relatively healthy. Final thing that I have from you, Bob, is as follows. For the Mets in particular, if you had to give an honest prediction from everything that you've heard as to what you think that they would do, how many players roughly you think that they will add by this year's deadline, and who exactly you think are most likely for those players to be, who would they be?
Yeah, I think this could be a smaller scale. I really do. I can see him getting 2 or 3 pieces. I can see it. Cedric Mullins fitting in perfectly there. I think they'll sniff on, or not sniff. I think they'll make strong talks. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get one of the Diamondback guys, either Gallen or Kelly. So I'll go Mullins and Merrill Kelly. I'll go with those 2 picks.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually, because Merrill Kelly is not someone that we really talked about much on the platform previously, because there hasn't been a lot of reported linkage outside of Zach Gallen. But like many Mets fans, including myself, Kelly's the more appealing, like guaranteed, exactly what you're getting type fit. And I think David Stearns would appreciate that kind of veteran being out of the rotation versus guys that maybe have higher upside but have lower floors in the process. So, Bob, thank you so much for coming on today. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I know this certainly won't be the last time. We'll be more than happy to have you come on again should you have interest, whether it's for, Mets trade deadline related discussions or the winter meetings, which we know are going to be oh so hectic per usual. But before I let you go, is there any final remarks that you would like to share in regards to maybe some upcoming work that you have, or maybe what fans should know as we get close to the deadline and what you plan to do coverage-wise?
Yeah, no, it's just it's a fun time of year, but just ignore like 98% of the rumors. You might have heard one yesterday where Marcell Ozuna was going from Atlanta to the Padres.
Hector,
Padres haven't even talked about him. That sort of thing. So, yeah, just you're going to hear a lot of noise, but just wait until the 31st. That's when stuff happens. It's like when you got to turn in your homework, or you got, some big thing to do at work. You always wait the last second. Same thing as baseball.
Love it. Thank you so much. That is Bob Nightengale of USA Today. This is your guy Tyler from WardyNYM. I'll see you all again soon. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, everybody. Let's go Mets. Peace out, everybody.